my beautiful swans. It is episode 27, and it is a bleak day out on the moors. There's trouble in the land. Balrogs, orcs, and other malevolent figures are afoot. People are worried. People are nervous. People are looking for answers. On this day in 1974, John Lennon released his album, Walls and Bridges, with the #1 hit single, Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Great song. But that kind of take it or leave it attitude does not rise to the occasion today. In 1970, John Lennon wrote a better song, Working Class Hero. And that's what we need. Despite all of this, even the fact that it is National Cinnamon Bun Day does not really make us feel that much better, although cinnamon buns are fucking great. My mom makes the greatest cinnamon buns. If you think your mom makes better cinnamon buns than mine, I'm sorry, you're incorrect. So, Working Class Hero, that's what we're talking about today. Let's check it out.
Hey everybody, it is episode 27. It's fall, it's chilly, it's cold. I told you it was going to happen. But fortunately, we have cinnamon buns to keep our souls warm. Okay, today, Working Class Hero. If you have not been living under a rock, you know that these are political times. These are troubled times. There is trouble in the air. There's trouble in the street. There's frickin' trouble in high offices, all right? And what goes better with trouble than folk music? Nothing. Folk music loves trouble. Whenever there's trouble in the land, folk music is there to raise our spirits, to fight back, to stand up. That's what folk music does. It's one of the things it does, all right? So let's go back to that defining moment in 1969 in August. Woodstock, that day when they nailed the frickin' coffin lid down on the 60s. Okay, day one was Folk Day, all right? Day one was dedicated to folk artists, more or less, okay? So it started off with Richie Havens, who kind of opened up by accident. Later on, Tim Hardin, famous folk singer from New York City. Arlo Guthrie, later on. Okay, so 3 in the fucking morning, who do they put on? Joan Baez. Joan fucking Baez. The moral center of the anti-war and social justice movement. Joan Baez, the folk singer who's standing next to Martin Luther King on the steps. Joan Baez, who's out there on the front lines, getting beat up, getting arrested, putting her frickin' life on the line. They put her on at 3 a.m. They could have had a little more fucking respect. They could have given her a better slot. Hippies are no good. No wonder the punks didn't like them. For God's sake, stupid hippies. Joan, however, is a professional. She's a consummate professional, and she gets up there and she does her job. And her job is to sing some songs. And she starts singing this song, Joe Hill. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you or me. I says to Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, said he. That's the first verse of I dreamt of Joe Hill last night. So who's this frickin' Joe Hill? This Joe Hill who's alive and who is not dead. But he is dead, but he's not dead. What's up with that? Joe Hill is a real working class hero. Not the John Lennon working class hero. Joe Hill is the real, honest to God, real deal working class hero. So he's not a made up guy. He's a real guy. He was born Joel Haglund in Sweden in 1879, moves to the States, starts roaming around looking for jobs. Before you know it, he hooks up with this organization called the International Workers of the World, IWW, or, wait for it, Wobblies. Okay, Wobblies, funny name, but serious business. Wobblies were a radical union movement in the early 1900s in the US. They wanted one big union. They wanted to unionize everybody. They were pretty socialist. They really believed that there was a irreconcilable class war going on, and that the bosses and the working class were at war, and the bosses would never give the working class a nickel unless the working class organized, got their shit together, and were able to put some pressure on the bosses to make them see the light. Okay, so pressure involved like strikes, direct action. It could, things could get a little rough here, and things did get rough because the bosses were hiring all these private investigator companies like Pinkertons and like a whole bunch of other ones to basically shoot workers who got uppity Okay, this is serious frickin' business. So Joe gets hooked up with the IWW. The IWW has all these like larger than life legendary figures. There's a Big Bill Haywood, who is like one of the founders. He looks like a freaking gangster. You don't want to meet Big Bill in a back alley when he's in a bad mood. So Big Bill says, I can explain capitalism to you in language that even a lawyer could understand. He says, if one man has $1 he didn't work for, some other man didn't get $1 he did work for. Boom. Capitalism. That's Big Bill's capitalism. It's a zero-sum game, right? Capitalists are getting all the dollars. Working class are getting screwed. Another person, a big person in that in the Wobblies, is Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. She is a union organizer, a feminist, a founding member of the American Civil Liberties Union. She is a firebrand. She is a ball of energy. She's up there on the ramparts. She's organizing. She's getting arrested. She's getting beat up. She's writing books and pamphlets. She is like one of the leaders of the Wobblies and organizers. She wrote this book called Sabotage, which actually sabotage is actually a thing that the Wobblies kind of were okay with. Sabot is a French word for a shoe. It was for a wooden shoe. So in the olden days, when the French workers were like there, with their wooden shoes on, and they were like in some kind of Willy Wonka steampunk kind of big machine in front of them, and their steam's coming up, and they're horrible, and the bosses are whipping them, and some guy just takes off his wooden shoe and drops it into this gigantic Willy Wonka machine, and the thing grinds to a halt. That's sabotage. I threw my shoe in the machine. So Elizabeth is, she's okay with sabotage. Okay, and by that she also includes strikes. We will stop working if you don't treat us right. Okay, the Wobblies were actually also very anti-racist, and they were largely they had a large percentage of immigrant members. Okay, so that includes guys like Joe, who just came from Sweden. Okay, so Joe's in there. He's doing his thing. He's bouncing around from place to place, organizing and getting on the front lines and everything. He's even up in Canada. He's in BC. Organizing and helping with the railway construction strike up there in Vancouver. So here's the thing about Joe. He's not just an organizer. He's the songwriter. He is the troubadour of the union, and the union believes in its troubadours, and it supports its troubadours, and it puts out this little book called the Little Red Songbook. And these things are just flying off the presses, okay? They're printing up thousands of these things, and they're sending them all over the U.S. And so everybody has a copy of the Little Red Songbook, and in the Little Red Songbook, there's just tons of songs by Joe Hill. Joe Hill has written all these union songs, all right? And he's writing all these uplifting songs about, sticking it to the man, and, about, workers who don't want to join the union. They're going to get it in the neck. And, it's pretty strong stuff. So Joe Hill is actually everywhere, and, he'll bring his guitar along. He can play violin, he can play piano, and it's just uplifting for the people on strike, and it's gives them a little extra energy and a little extra focus and a little extra strength, and that's what that's all about. Okay, so Joe, he's bouncing around, he's all over the place. Eventually he ends up in just outside of Salt Lake City. Okay, so here's where Joe runs into the worst possible luck. Okay, so Joe is he's in Salt Lake City. On the other side of Salt Lake City, or this little town out, it's a suburb of Salt Lake City. On the other side of town, a couple of masked guys in red bandanas go into a store, and it looks like a robbery, and they shoot the proprietor and his son dead. They don't actually rob anything, which is curious. It sounds like the son may have shot back at one of them, so they think one of the robbers might have a bullet wound. On the other side of town, Joe has a sweetheart, Hilda, and Hilda had a fiance, Otto. Are we all together on this? So we got Joe, Hilda, Otto. Hilda has decided that no, she's not going to marry Otto. Okay, Otto's a little pissed about this. Hilda is also kind of having a little cuddly affair with Joe Hill. Okay, Hillstrom. Sometimes he's Joe Hillstrom, and they shorten it to Hill. So Hilda's basically fooling around with Joe. She's dropped Otto. Otto confronts Joe and, says, you rotten bastard, and he shoots him. So he doesn't shoot him fatally, okay? So Joe has an entry wound and an exit wound, and if you must have a wound, that's the kind of wound you want, right? So, but nevertheless, Joe goes back to Hilda's place, and he's laying on the couch, and he's a little miserable, and she goes, "What's wrong with you?" And Joe goes, "Nothing much." The typical guy, right? Typical tough guy. And but then Hilda realizes he's bleeding all over her couch. So they take him to the doc and says, "Oh, can you patch me up?" Well, the brainiacs over there in the doctor's office put two and two together. Okay, there's a murder across town, and I got a guy here with a bullet wound. Okay, they call the cops right away, and they throw Joe in jail. So here's the context of all this. The Wobblies have been making shit in Salt Lake City for a while now. They've had some demonstrations. There's actually been a couple guys, Wobblies, killed by these rotten Pinkertons and other hired guns that the bosses have hired there. So tensions are high, right? So here's Joe in jail. They're going to make a fucking example of Joe, aren't they? Right? So they put him on trial, and it's a fucking shambles. It's a fiasco. It's a joke trial, right? So, Joe has no motive. All the witnesses originally take a look at Joe and say, "No, that's not the guy." And then after some helpful coaching, they come back and go, "Oh yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, Joe, that's the guy, that wobbly guy. Yeah, kill him." And it just goes on and on like this. And Joe, constantly, and his lawyers are just like pointing out the holes in the prosecution's case. And it doesn't matter. They want him dead. He's a wobbly. They don't like him. So so basically they arrange for him to be killed, right? He's guilty. So they're going to execute him by firing squad. So, meanwhile, the letters and cards are pouring in. People are saying, "This is a joke. Don't do it. Don't do it. Give him clemency. Reconsider." Even the president of the frickin' United States, Woodrow Wilson, sends a telegram to the governor saying, "It's 1915. I'm trying to run a fucking war here, and the Swedes are our allies. What are you doing with this mock trial? What this joke trial here? You're gonna piss off all the Swedes. That's not helping me." No dice. Elizabeth Gurley Flynn comes and visits him in jail and tries to help. No dice. His girlfriend, Hilda, comes and visits him in jail. As she talks to him in English and he talks to her in Swedish. So here's the question. Why didn't Hilda just come forward and say Otto did it? Okay. Or why didn't Joe just come forward and say Otto did it? Shot me. I got an alibi. Joe refused to do that. It's almost like a long black veil kind of situation, where he just would not put the honor of his girlfriend at risk. Or there's also talk that maybe the girlfriend was threatened by the Pinkertons and the other rotten bums that the state had hired. Who knows? We'll never know. Anyway, last day. Joe Hill sends off 2 telegrams. He sends one telegram to Big Bill, his buddy Big Bill. And in that telegram, he says, "Don't mourn, organize." Basically, don't worry about me. There's more guys like me. Just keep up the good work. And that becomes one of the mottos of the Wobblies. His other telegram, he writes his last will and testament, and he writes it in the form of a poem. How great is that? We should all have our last will and testament in poem form. So basically, in his poem, his last will and testament poem, he says, my body, if I could choose, I would, to ashes it reduced. So he wants to be cremated. He says, "Let the merry breeze blow my dust where some flowers grow, and then maybe life will bloom again, blah, blah, blah," right? Very nice. So he sends off his last will and testament to the Wobbly headquarters. Next day, they march him out. They pin a little target on his heart, and it's just like in a bad TV show. The captain says, "Ready, aim," and Joe yells out, "Fire. Fire, you bastards." So Joe is the guy who yells fire at his own execution. What a fucking guy. What a working class hero. That's your fucking working class hero for you. Okay, so, and they do. They kill him. 4 bullet holes in the heart. Boom, he's gone. So, you may think this is the end of the Joe story. Far from it. It's like a K-Tel commercial. Wait, there's more. Okay, so they have a little bit of a funeral in Salt Lake City. And actually, there's actually even notes from a spy infiltrator that they've hired to get into the funeral. A woman who like takes notes, and basically she didn't find anything bad. Everybody's singing Joe's songs. Joe's folk songs are living on. Okay, Rebel Girl, Preacher and the Slave. They're singing all these songs. So another interesting thing is Hilda says that she was one of the 6 girl pallbearers. I don't see any reference to that anywhere else, but it's an interesting picture. Another thing, the only thing Joe has on him in his cell, besides his clothes, is a little picture of a boy on a pony. The boy on the pony is Elizabeth Gurley Flynn's son. Why is that? Do you think there's more going on there? We'll never know. But Joe for sure had an interesting relationship with Elizabeth. Anyway, I digress, as I do, all right? So anyway, one of Joe's wishes is get, as soon as you can, get my body across state lines, because I don't want to be caught dead in Utah, which is kind of funny. So they do. They grab his body, and they ship it off to Chicago. And they have another great big frickin' funeral there. And there's like parades and hundreds of thousands of people marching in the streets, singing his songs, There's Power in a Union. And they cremate him. Okay. You may think that's the end of the Joe story. Far from it. Wait, there's more. The Ronco tape case. No. What the Wobblies do is they take Joe's cremated remains and they make up 600 of these little envelopes. Letter envelopes, and they print a picture of Joe, good-looking man Joe, on the envelope. Inside the envelope, they put a little copy of his last will and testament poem, and they also put a little message from Big Bill. And Big Bill says, "Don't mourn, organize." And it also says Joe was killed by the capitalist class. Okay. And then they take some Joe's ashes and they put some ashes in each one of these 600 envelopes, and they mail them off to every wobbly office around the States and even some overseas. And the idea is that 1 year from today, they will be like little celebrations everywhere. They'll open up the packet of ashes and they'll let Joe's ashes go in the breeze, as per his last will and testament. This actually happens. So there are pictures of wobbly places all around the U.S. having these little celebrations 1 year later, letting the ashes out and singing Joe's songs. There's more. Okay, hold on to your seats. So the U.S. Post Office it intercepts a lot of these, and actually the FBI, I think, raids IWW headquarters at one point, and they get a bunch of the packets before they can even be mailed. So only some of the packets get mailed. So the post office looks at these packets and it goes, well, this is wartime. This is subversive. This has got to go. Okay, so they pull the packets out and they don't mail them. One of these packets ends up like in a drawer, and then it ends up in the post office archives. In the 1980s, okay, some post office lady is going through the archives like she does, doing her filing, and she pulls out this thing, and there's this envelope with this faded picture of a guy, and eventually she opens it up and she realizes, oh, this is Joe Hill's ashes. Weird, eh? She tells some people, and word gets out, and before you know it, boom. The Wobblies get in touch with these guys and they say, hey, we want Joe's ashes back. And some negotiations ensue and they get them. Okay, so the post office hands over this packet. And so as soon as the Wobblies get this, the remaining Wobblies. Okay, so this is 1980. Wobblies don't exist anymore. Basically, they were crushed in the 20s by this extreme government reaction to them. But they kind of still exist, and as far as I can tell, the Wobblies that still exist are like mostly folk singers. Okay, so trouble and folk goes together, right? So they're working, they take their packet. One of these guys from just immediately like eats some of Joe's ashes. Okay. Another one of these guys, Utah Phillips, he takes some of ashes and puts it in his guitar, which as far as I know, they're there to this day. And some of the ashes went back to IWW headquarters. So the guys at IWW headquarters, they call up Billy Bragg, modern day folk singer in the 80s, and say, hey, we got some of Joe's ashes. You want to eat them? It's like, I got some mushrooms. Do you want to eat them? Billy Bragg, I think, initially says, it seems a little weird. No, thanks. But then Billy Bragg ends up in the States on tour like a year or two later, and these guys show up and they go, I got the packet, I got some acid. You want to do it? And so Billy Bragg says, okay, all right, sure. Why not? And so they just get some big tankards of ale and they put some ashes in it and down she goes. So Billy Bragg had an interesting cocktail that day. And that is nearly the end of the story. Not quite, okay? There were some other packets that ended up, being late. One guy released his packet in 1950, and he felt good about it. He did his duty to Joe and all that stuff. So a couple more things. Way later, decades later, somebody found a letter from Hilda basically saying, yeah, Otto did it. Okay, this does Joe no good now. Another thing, years later, one of the guys that was actually they looked at for the crime of the murder was this Norwegian guy, this Olsen guy, and what's his name? Magnus Olsen, I think. But they let him go. Like, they put him in jail for 30 days for vagrancy, and they said, piss off. It turns out this guy is a career criminal, and in 1920, he was involved he worked for Al Capone in Chicago and was involved in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. That was the guy that killed the store owner. And it sounds like that the store owner was an ex-policeman, and they just had a grudge against him, and they shot him dead, not to rob him, just to kill him. So all this after the fact knowledge does us no frickin' good now. So what I'm going to say is that's the story of Joe Hill, working class hero, the real deal, the beacon of hope and song for the working class folk singer, Joe Hill. I'm going to play Rebel Girl, one of his songs that he wrote for Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. And we'll see if that works. Okay? So you guys be good. And this time I mean it. This time I mean it, okay? Be good. All right. See if we can do this. The Rebel Girl by Joe Hill. There are women of many descriptions in this cruel world, as everybody knows. Some are living in beautiful mansions. They're wearing the finest of clothes. They're the blue-blooded queens and princesses. Wear charms made of diamonds and pearls. But the only and thoroughbred lady is the rebel girl. That's the rebel girl. Yeah, the rebel girl. To the working class, she's a precious pearl. From Maine down to Georgia, you'll see fighting for you and for me. Yeah, she's there by your side with her courage and pride. She's unequal anywhere, and I'm proud to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. Yeah, her hands may be hardened from labor, and her dress may not be so very fine.
heart in a bosom that's beaten and is true to her class and her kind. And the grafters in terror are trembling when a spite and defiance she'll hurl for the only and thoroughbred lady is the rebel girl. Well, that's the rebel girl. The rebel girl to the working class. She's a precious pearl. From Maine down to Georgia, you'll see they're fighting for you and for me. Yeah, she's there by your side with a courage and a pride. She's unequal anywhere, and I'm proud to fight for freedom with a rebel girl. And I'm proud to fight for freedom with a rebel